And I
Yep.
think we have about 8 people in the room so far.
Yep.
So I guess if maybe we give everybody an extra minute to get in the room. I think there was 17 people who are RSVP'd.
Yeah, it's not a problem, Keith. You just let me know when you're ready for me.
Okay, sounds great. And I guess today, given that there were some technical difficulties, Daniel and I will be co-hosting.
Always have a plan B and a backup.
Yeah, that's why we're in this industry, right?
Exactly. It's a good demonstration.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually was just like I put all my BC plans on SharePoint, but then I had to make BC plans that aren't on SharePoint because mine not have SharePoint. So I had like a backup plan to the backup plan.
All right. Well, we're 3 minutes past the hour. I think we gave everybody enough time to log on. So without further ado, I'll just introduce Curtis Ivins. We've had him as previously as a guest speaker, but he was out of Asheville, North Carolina, and some of the neighboring areas. And in the fall, he came on, and unbeknownst to us at the time, there was a Hurricane Helene coming. And so, Curtis and we kept in contact throughout the event, and everything that unfolded was pretty horrific. So just as boots on ground, I wanted to invite him back. I know he's been super busy, even today, still catching up on stuff. So we're really blessed and honored to have you here to share your story of, the events unfolding. But yeah, Curtis is, one of our, he belongs in our veteran outreach program, and he's a prior Army officer. And so, without further ado, I'll let you share what you want to share about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the intro, Keith, and for everybody on the net, it's good to talk to y'all. Don't mind any little bit of background. I am on the road today. So as we're talking, Keith, I would ask as well if you can just let me know if there are any questions in chat. Just go ahead and cut me off, throw them up there, and that way I can make sure I address them. So a little bit about me. As Keith was saying, I'm a retired Army officer. Military intelligence is my trade. I got out in October of 2023. About 6 months prior to that, with a senior business partner, I started a consulting company focused on holistic emergency preparedness, all hazards, a lot of security assessments, and our bread and butters really became critical infrastructure very quickly. We covered nationally. We're still a very small organization. We work with mostly veterans and prior law enforcement in my team. But we're headquartered in the Asheville area. And I live there personally, along with a couple members of my team. And where this really kind of started folding out, and it's led to me talking to y'all again, is, as Keith was saying, I spoke with y'all in September in this forum and kind of shared a little bit about how my business came to be and what our focus is and kind of some lessons learned to share with veterans. And unbeknownst, as you heard, about a week later, Helene came rolling right through Western North Carolina and created something rather biblical in nature. And that's kind of what I want to talk to y'all about today. So I kind of give you a little bit of my background. I want to talk about some of the disaster lessons learned, what we saw, what we did. Obviously, that has a lot of relevance to us as disaster and business continuity professionals. But also, I have another slide I want to share and kind of some of the things I saw about veterans. Some of those really niche skills and things that come natural to us that were absolutely pivotal in what we saw and what we had to do here. So if you can go to that second slide, and we're talking about Helene, whoever's driving. Okay, perfect. So you're going to see on here 2 categories, what we had to do and what we accomplished. So what we had to do, let's talk about what happened, right? So Helene rolled up. We saw it starting to impact throughout the Southeast and start targeting Western North Carolina. So a couple days out, we started getting a better feel for what was potentially going to happen here. I don't think anyone really anticipated what did happen, but enough to know that something wasn't going to go right. So a lot of us started just, filling up the gas tanks, check the generators. Do you have some extra water? Some of those common sense precautions that is a little more common sense to people like us on this call, but not so much to the entire public. And you had plenty of people that also didn't really. So then Helene hit. Most of us, even myself, my family, and some of my people here in town, we buckled down, right? We just shuttered our houses. We stayed inside. We watched things unfold. And thankfully, we were blessed for myself, my family, my home, my office location, and my people. You know, our homes made it. Our families were okay. Every person in my business was okay. We lost some equipment. We had some damage. You know, the power went out, the grid went down. And that's part of the lessons learned we talk about, as well as we were at ground zero of a complete grid down. All sectors of critical infrastructure ceased to exist and function. We're talking communications, water, sewer, septic, electric, all of it. Nothing worked, period. Communications was a very big part as well, and I'll talk about that a lot. Thankfully for myself and my team, we had redundant mobile Starlink capabilities, good push-to-talk capabilities, but initially, especially when we're talking locally, push-to-talk was actually the only way to get around, because even though we were able to fire up some of our Starlinks that made it, we could talk outside of Western North Carolina, but you couldn't talk inside of it because no one else had those redundant capabilities. So we were literally using push-to-talk and truck mounts to talk one valley over and sort of leapfrogging updates so we could try to figure out exactly what just happened to us. Once those clouds parted and the rain stopped, we started just looking around, trying to understand what just happened. That's where we get to that D+3 AO recon, I'm calling it. So D+3, when I knew my family was well cared for, and you know, all my people were clearly thinking the same way, we literally stuck our heads out of our valleys, started driving the truck out as far as you could go, see where the roads were severed, what was going on out there. And a couple of us literally found each other on the side of the road trying to get cell phone signals. And we quickly just, you know, we're like, great. I'm over seeing one of my guys, Dustin, and his fiance. I'm like, hey, y'all are alive. That's great. This is a good start. And then we all just kind of rallied up and figured we had to do something, because this was our home. This was our area of expertise. And we had to do something. We didn't quite know what it was yet. What we started is, most of us out in our area, we had wells. We had redundant power capabilities, and we were able to keep our wells alive. So those of us in the countryside, we still had that backup water capability. So we literally threw water troughs in the back of our pickup trucks. I swear we cleaned them first. That's always the first question. But we cleaned them, filled them from the wells, through our mobile Starlink unit that survived on top of the truck. And we started going around to pop-up locations and literally just offering people water, Starlink connectivity, so they could, you know, check their email, actually call their families and tell them, you know, they were alive and they made it. You know, we threw snacks in there for the kids. We didn't have much other food. You know, the snacks were literally coming out of Kurt's personal pantry at that point. And we started getting a feel for how bad it was. Most of our operations started on the south and west side of Asheville, and that's kind of where we centralized initially. And that location didn't see as much household and entire community destruction, but we saw the isolation impacting us quickly. No one could get in or out. Like I said, all sectors of critical infrastructure were down. No one had supplies. And on that D+3 through that D+7 window, we started seeing how bad it was. We were finding people on D+4 that were literally bringing their kids by hand in wagons to where we were and saying they'd already been out of water for 2 days and they had no food for their kids and they had no communications, right? And they didn't even have water to flush their toilets. So we started having to instruct people on, okay, we'll go down to the creek with a 5-gallon bucket and take that water to flush your commodes. Well, guess what? People didn't even have 5-gallon buckets. And we were running into people because we were giving water out of water trough because we certainly didn't have enough canteens to pass around, but people didn't even have jugs to scoop water. We had people coming to us with flower vases to scoop out water and hand carry it back to their houses, so they would have water for another day. And, you know, then begging when we were coming back with another load of water and Starlink and food. So that's kind of how the entire effort sort of blew out of proportion rather quickly there. And within a week, we had a full operation, 7-day-a-week, sunrise to sunset distribution hub that quickly just came to be. We were seeing thousands of people per day coming through for food, water, fuel, hygiene products. We quickly started getting in the high-end generators, heaters, water filtrations. Those sort of systems started coming in through the network. And the network is kind of one of those veteran skills that I want to talk about here in a little bit as well. But it really came to be, and that's how it brought stuff in. We also very much used my business, PCS, as the umbrella for the operation. So we kept it as a private business operation versus even a church operation or an NGO. And that allowed us to start getting trucks in through roads that were, being blockaded and inspected when the roads actually opened, to which there was only one or two ways in. But we were bringing those in under the auspices of my company, which allowed a significant amount of freedom of operation. We also worked closely with some federal and some state law enforcement in the area, and I would use them to literally escort our trucks into where my hub is. We also started executing rotary wing operations because the church campus that we first started on had a ball field. I had some retired Air Force personnel that knew what a HLZ was, so they set up HLZ and they started dropping stuff in. First, it was private helicopters. You've heard multiple times, I'm sure, this was literally the largest private airlift operation in United States history in terms of the number of personal aircraft that started coming in. We were getting in little 1- and 2-seater helicopters that were literally shoving food and water under their front seats and sling loading by rope what they could to us. And that's how it started. And very quickly, we started pulling some strings through the old veteran network, and we were getting in the Chinooks. So we started getting heavy helicopter drop. We got to be about 25 rotary wing drops from Chinooks total on the ball field. And that allowed us to get the pallets of water, shelf-stable 25-year water, MREs, generators, some medical needs, blankets, those sort of things that allowed us to rapidly step up with people's aid. So that's what kind of started around D+7. By the time we got to D+21, we outgrew the church campus. The church wanted to kind of get their worship operations going again, of course, which I supported. So we moved about 5 miles down the street to a massive field operation. It was about a 15-acre field. We used a small portion of it, and we started setting up tents that we got donated or purchased, a couple large drashes and some Amazon Chinese tents that were sitting around. We started throwing up everything we could, and we actually managed to do a full logistics jump to that new location in less than a week, which was pretty miraculous, especially we were just using people's pickup trucks and trailers from home type situation. We were using John Deere's instead of skids, and we were just making it happen at that point. It really was a coalition of private people, neighbors helping neighbors. And that quickly led from there. So D+21, we were in a field operation, and part of that was not just the drive-through, but we were sending out ground teams across 7 counties. We were pushing out convoys based on needs. We'd send out a first package, would be our reconnaissance, verify need, verify route trafficability, come back, report, and then we'd package up a massive convoy and we send them out. And we started out in the Fairview area, out towards Bat Cave, Chimney Rock. Some of those names probably sound familiar if you've watched the news. And a lot of those towns, they really ceased to exist, quite frankly. And there were some pretty horrific things seen, a lot of loss, both life and property, and a lot of very hard needs. So we were doing everything we could to meet those food and water needs. And as we talk through that, I won't go overly down the rabbit hole. I'm sure there'll probably be some questions towards the end. I'll certainly pause, make sure there's time for that. But in terms of federal and state aid, what were they doing? We can spend a lot of time talking about that. There are plenty of positive and negative stories there, but what I'll tell you is they were there. They were doing things. Did they do the best they could? No, they did not. Were they incredibly effective? No, they were not. There were a lot of lessons learned there. A lot of them I have shared up the chain through my network already. I've had some conversations actually with the new FEMA leadership directly who wanted to speak with me, and I was very candid with them. There's a lot there that needs to be done. They were trying, but I also recognize that there are two things that the average person does not appreciate is one, the level of disaster and complexity of the situation. I think all of you probably have a reasonable appreciation for that. Any disaster is complex and difficult. This was unique. Nothing this bad has ever happened before in this type of area. It's a lot to handle and overcome. And two, we all recognize and we have experience in what is federal bureaucracy, right? It's not smooth. It's not straightforward. It can be very difficult, and you have to meet standards, expectations, inspections, right? There's always political pressure for one thing or the other. And those dynamics really set the situation up for failure, I believe. So that's where I'm very thankful that there was a very large private response, and that made a really big difference.
Curtis,
also,
I got one question. I didn't mean to cut you off, but Brian just posted in the chat. He said, "Do you have a COP and comms with the convoys?"
Yes. So what we would do is we basically established a pace. So we had an additional mobile Starlink that we pushed out. That one did not have the roam capability. So if they needed to do a comms check, they would have to stop, go static, set it up, and basically based on phase lines on the map, provide an update. We did have some push to talk capabilities. Unfortunately, most of it was within about a 15-mile radius in terms of our capabilities. We had Balfanes that were not properly programmed yet, and trying to use the Mount Mitchell repeater, which was going in and out. So we very much had to operate on a pace scale. And again, this is going to go into the next slide, which I'll get to in a second. But when we're talking about educating civilians on some of these very basic fundamentals in terms of like pace, what is pace? I sat there and had that class multiple times that first week. Hopefully that answers your question. But so again, I kind of highlighted, the limitations for, federal and state teams. I think they quickly tried to get their feet under them. But again, there were things amiss there, which was necessary for private operations to come in and help. And that's also part of why I have kept my operation private this entire time, even though I probably certainly could have swooped in and taken some sort of large federal contract. But I prefer the freedom of movement and operation solely being in charge of this myself. And it's allowed me to search exactly where I need to without any sort of approval. Before we go to the next slide, we'll kind of talk a little bit about what we accomplished. So we continued the drive-through hub operation into December. In the month of December, we started dialing it back, mostly because of the need to winterize our supplies. We were operating in a tent field environment, like I said, and we recognized the imminent horizon of freeze concern for some foods, water, baby food, baby formula, those sort of things, medicines. So we started trying to dial back and find winterized solutions. Most other hubs in the area were doing the same thing. Again, quickly trying to find warehouses and static locations, and we tried to quickly start striking that balance. We found ourselves moving quickly towards a lot more deployment to point needs of supplies. And we continued that shift, frankly, through those first months of the winter. And going into probably in the months of January, February, the hub site sat mostly idle and just kept as winterized storage. We even had an empty semi that we filled with all of our water. We put heaters in it with a generator, and we kept everything from freezing that way at times. And then as we got into the spring, we started site cleanup, which we're still doing even today, and focused on those point needs. But through the drive-through operation, we kept pretty decent count of everything coming through. Everybody coming in, they were given slips to fill out with their name, their contact information, household number, zip code. that sort of information, so we could try to get a feel for where people were coming from and what their needs were. And that allowed us to really stay focused. But that allowed us to count about 73,000 people were provisioned directly to the drive-through hub. We're talking about our deployment field operations. We were at about 50,000 people provisioned. That number was a little bit harder to calculate for obvious reasons. It's less hands-on, but that's our estimate. So we were looking at about 123,000 people over the last 6+ months. And again, operations are still going on right now. It's just evolved a little bit. We've tried to keep count of our logistics at least a little bit. We were looking at about a 4.8% depreciation rate. By that, I mean, loss of supply. So it can be, a case of water breaks open or freezes, or clothes got wet and had to be thrown away. Especially with field operations, it's very difficult to accomplish. So to say you had no losses would be a foolish thing to do. FEMA tries to start their estimate off a 5% standard, and I'm proud to say we kept it, right about at that standard. Not too bad for a bunch of civilians in tents, in my opinion. In terms of costs, again, this was all private operation, right? So I threw a lot of my business resources behind it. Basically, frankly, almost all of it. We got in a lot of donations. We put ourselves under a fiscal sponsorship of a nonprofit, even though we are a profit organization. So we got that sponsorship to help ensure accountability and receptiveness by donors. But we were able to keep our per person costs at about 12% below the FEMA standard as well. So again, we feel pretty good about the numbers we were able to stick with. And as business continuity professionals, I know all of you can appreciate the need in the end to watch those metrics and stay analytical. And that last bullet point is going to kind of pivot me to the next slide when I talk about evolution, right? Change, recognizing the criticality of staying with the change in needs. Just as a simple example, going into winter, guess what? That means people need heaters. People did not want or need heaters in late September when Helene hit and it was a beautiful 70-degree day. But how do you stay ahead of those evolutions? I also kind of picked on that when I talked about transferring our field operations more to point delivery needs. Drive-through numbers were dropping because of the local needs. So we had to recognize that and constantly establish new phases. I've put very much in charge a phased model approach. We would just go phase 1, 2, 3, 4. Right now we are in phase 7 Bravo. I'll tell you right now, and phase 7 Bravo is going to carry us through the summer. And that's where basically we are finding and meeting those dispersed needs. And, part of that as well is what new disasters, right? So we're so far separated from Helene multiple times now, we say we're not even doing Helene relief, right? We're looking at those second, third, fourth order effects, those downhill traces, especially when we start looking at the new floods in Kentucky and Tennessee, wildfires throughout Western North Carolina. We were just sending MREs to a bunch of firefighters the other day, keep them going. And when those floods hit Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Virginia, we quickly turning around and pushing out excess supplies in that direction. 1 5-day period alone, we sent out 13,000 cubic feet worth of supplies. We were going almost 24/7 loading semis at night, again with John Deere's, and trying to push these immediate supplies out. So very successful lessons learned there. And that's one of the things that we're talking collectively as a private organizations as well, as how do we really codify these lessons learned moving forward now that we feel like we're in a bit more of a steady state operation. And I think there's going to be some tremendous stuff that we are able to capture and share across the community here going forward. I'll talk about that a little bit more at the very end. But let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to talk about these veterans traits that I think would be very important for all of you to really take to heart. Okay. All of us, it doesn't matter whether you were in for one contract period or you fully retired from service. We're all very unique in who we are as veterans, which is why we have teams like this getting together to provide console and support, especially in transition. And there's 2 aspects to that. One is we are different than other people in the way we think and act and the skills that we have. And it's also very difficult to make that transition. So sometimes it can be difficult to recognize the positive things in us, especially amidst the culture where, sometimes we can be denigrated for, PTSD or stress or injuries, or we put ourselves in a victim complex. All that's very important. Hey, I'm medically retired, 90%, almost all PTSD. There's nothing wrong with that, but we don't need a victim culture as well. And part of that is where I want to talk about these traits, right? And I quickly saw it in myself in very new ways because I've only been recently retired. But I saw these things come out upon myself and the fellow veterans that I pulled into my operation. And I did not see them replicated in the civilian side. And we tried very hard to help kind of teach it. But some of these traits, you can teach skills, you can't teach traits. Traits come through experience. And these are the sort of things that we have. That first one, decisiveness. Decisiveness was absolutely key at the point of crisis. And I'll tell you, almost everyone around us was anything but decisive. This goes back to where I was laying out D+3, D+7, the decisions we made based on what we saw. The ability to slap the table, see a need, and execute. No matter what's going on, I'm putting their fog of war. Obviously this is not war, but the fog is there, right? The confusion of the situation, the need. You're seeing hungry children, people without water. And at the same time, your own families at home and have needs, right? It's a very emotionally gripping situation, and yet decisions have to be made. And I and the fellow veterans were able to do that. And frankly, that's why I took lead of the operation. This was never my intent. Do not get me wrong. Not even the week Helene happened. I never intended to be running an operation for nearly 7 months now. However, in the absence of command, what are we all taught and experienced? In absence of command, you just take command. You just take charge. So I put an ICS system in place. I started teaching people what an incident command system is. I go, hey, FEMA has a framework for this. We're going to execute this. And yes, whether you like it or not, I'm at the top of the framework. And this is simply how the decisions are going to be made. Part of that as well is being flexible and agile, right? The best plan never survives first contact is the joke we all know. And that's true. So as needs change, recognize those and change with them. Don't be so stuck in your ways that you can't adjust to the situation. And that's what a lot of private hubs suffered. It was the inability to flex, change, establish that new phase like I was talking about. And part of that as well, right? Were you wrong? Did you make a mistake? Did you make a sudden decisive decision that was maybe only half right? Now you need to pivot. Guess what? I made a lot of wrong decisions as well as I did right ones. And if someone presented me with that and had a good solution otherwise, that's part of leadership as well, where you go, guess what? Okay, you're right. Execute that new plan. We don't have time to waste. People are hungry and people are thirsty. We got to do this. So that's another really important skill to remember. Next also is endurance. I just said 7+ months. That's a long time. And I tell you what, I have lost a lot of volunteers, a lot of good ones as well. I'd say after about 2 weeks, most civilians no longer had endurance to do relief operations. It was a massive drop off. We would go from hundreds of volunteers a day to sometimes there was a dozen or two of us. And I'll tell you, after a few months, there were days where there would be 4 or 5 of us running a hub and helping thousands of people per day. Endurance, the ability to stick to it and stay on course when you know you're right and you're doing the right thing. That's a very important skill that, for the most part, veterans were the ones that filled that 90% of the time for me. Orders, we know how to both give them and we know how to follow them, right? Kind of like when I was talking about the leadership, flexible, agile, accept it, move on, change if needed. Were you wrong? The ability to simply say, yes, sir, and carry on. And I don't mean that like an authoritarian, assertive way, but when you're making decisive action, sometimes you don't have time to sit there and hash it out or explain it. Things need to happen, especially when it's life limb on the line, and that's exactly what we saw. Knowing logistics, DOS analysis, day of supply analysis, right? The ability to look at it and say, what's my output? And as such, what does my input need to be? I had to get into fights, both literally and figuratively, frankly, with some civilians that would be upset at the amount of water I would be bringing in. They'd go, why do we need 500 pallets of water? And I'd have to explain, well, this is the only shipment of water coming for 2 weeks, and we're burning through this much per day. And it simply comes down to the fact that we still don't have enough. And that was beyond comprehension for a lot of civilians, as well as the hub-spoke model. So hub-spoke model was quickly what we went with, where we had our hub and we would build trusted, reliable spokes at those forward deployed locations. Our first one was in Fairview, outside of Batcave. We did put one in Batcave as well. Spruce Pine, Burnsville, some of these towns should sound familiar. We sent hubs there and built spokes. And then we would keep them resupplied based on their needs. We would have established pace and communications with them. To be able to put that model in place was groundbreaking immediately. And also anticipating class needs. So that ties into being flexible, agile, recognizing change. So do we need more food, water, blankets, medical? You know, when we're looking towards people starting to get more diseases because of exposure, we started getting in, had more medicine come in, anti-diarrheas, you know, hydrating capabilities, some medical capabilities, especially for children. You know, little ones start getting dehydrated, it doesn't go well quickly. So trying to stay ahead of it to prevent some of those second and third order effects. The ability for veterans to recognize that and at least see it for what it is invaluable in these types of situations. And any sort of continuity or emergency planning, it has to be a consideration. Almost done with this slide. So we're talking about recon and intel. I spoke earlier about pushing out ground teams to do reconnaissance. The amount of false information, whether purposeful or not, that was going around, especially when social media came back up. Social media was of absolutely no help whatsoever. It was daunting. You'd hear about dire needs, communities that were dying off. You'd go there and they'd just look at you and go, "What are you talking about? We're fine." So we very quickly had the importance of establishing literally RFIs, PIRs, what needs answering, what needs verification before we invest in a large ground convoy or log pack to take supplies out. So starting to track that was quickly pivotal. I'd say starting around week 2 through week 6 and 7. That was a huge focus for us. And we started having a lot of people coming to our hub solely to get that intelligence. They could come to my command post and we'd say, "Well, what can you do?" Okay, well, based on what you can do, what you're bringing, let me match you up to a verified location. I'm going to send you to this address. By the way, here's a grid coordinate as well, because cell phones are down. You can't use the maps on your phone. And here's the established point of contact, a name and a location where you can find this person and go talk to them. So that being able to provide that information was almost as valuable as providing actual supplies at that point. Lastly, the network. So our ability to follow through on not what you know, but who you know. You know, the ability to go, "Hey, I'm not good at radios, but I got a guy for that, and I can call him because I know he's got a backup comms method and he can get over here." The ability to tap in that network is invaluable. Okay, when we're talking about dropping down Chinooks, before long, quickly, because again, I wasn't out that long, I was just calling the pilots on their personal cell phones and talking to them at the Asheville airport, telling them what to go find, put on their damn helicopters and bring to me. The ability to do that was invaluable. It continues to be so today, especially as we move into month 7. We know who across these private organizations can and cannot be trusted, because yes, there's some bad organizations out there taking advantage of the situation, monetizing people suffering. But we know who to trust, we know who to call. And whether it be other veterans or simply you recognizing the ability in yourself to network, build that Rolodex of people and let them know they can trust you as well, is incredibly valuable. So I was going hot and heavy there for kind of while, spreading out all that information. I want to pause for a second and ask if there's some questions, and then I can kind of explain a little bit more about where our operation's going from now. So let me go ahead and pause and see if any questions, please.
If you have any questions, just throw it up in the chat, and I'll read your question off.
Yeah, the chat seems a bit quiet. I think people are in engaged mode, kind of processing to see what they would do. You know, I think there's a lot of a lot of elements to consider. The command and control of this seems fantastic, and there's so many different. I think when you talk about flexibility and agility, that's key. You got to be able to look at what's going on, accept that you did it wrong, and do it better.
Now, I've got a question for you, Curtis. How did security play a role in this whole event?
Yeah, I think that was one of my bullet points, and I jumped over without saying it. But you're right, security was absolutely paramount in this. So once we got into D+3, D+4, security became a very big concern. There was no law enforcement presence in South or West Asheville at that point. Trust me. And I get it because they were busy. They had a lot of places to be. But the entire community was in what you would call a self-policing mode. Local gas stations that still had any fuel or any supplies left had their own little private militias out front. And that's just the reality of it. Okay. We are in Appalachia. People have guns. I really don't care whether you like them or not, but they were necessary. For the security of my hub, especially for those first few weeks, I had 24/7 roving security, including night patrols. Yes, they were armed. For the first couple of weeks, we were in kit with both primary and secondary weapon systems. And a big part of that is because we had to have that hard posture. We had to project a tough security posture. And that we never got robbed once. And most hubs were getting pillaged like crazy. Some hubs were getting shot up, including churches, and robbed. The local hospitals, you won't see it much in the news. Again, it's just how it was. A lot of this was not in the news. ERs were getting shot up so the medicine could be stolen. People were getting hurt. So we had to have a hard posture. Yes, some people were upset about that. We would just say, smile, God bless you, have a nice day. You're welcome for the free food, by the way. But we also were very receptive of what the local temperature was, right? So you could feel when it's getting hot or cold in terms of how people are behaving. And we would adjust our security posture accordingly. So once everyone was fed and provisioned and you could see that they felt like their families were going to be cared for again, the temperature definitely dropped. And, so did we. So then I would instruct my people, all primaries, go back into your trucks. They're on standby. We can get them if needed, but all you need on your belt is a secondary. And then eventually we dialed it all the way back to just concealed carry until we felt like we had to do something otherwise. But we very much had to adjust on that. We had to keep people safe. It was a very dynamic environment, and I think we struck the right balance. And the other part of that that I will drop in there is, again, the benefit of using my company as an umbrella. PCS is licensed in the state of North Carolina for private security purposes. So very simply, those personnel that I used for security, whether they were originally PCS or not, or volunteer, under the disaster declaration and stand-in law, I was able to essentially deputize them inside PCS. So we had basically, legal authority to do what we were doing.
I have a couple more questions on the board now. So from Brian, he said, any insight on how the utility company performed? He works for BC for a utility company.
Hey, that's a great question, and I love it. I do a lot of consulting, especially with electrical co-ops, so I've shared a lot of lessons learned with them already. So out on my side, most of it was Duke Energy out here. A few co-ops like Haywood Cooperative, a few of those. I think they responded quite well. They were very well postured to respond as soon as needed. There's I can't remember the name of the cooperative pact they have out here in the Southeast, but to mutually help each other, and they had assets staged quite quickly. They had a lot of challenge with getting to cut off locations. They had challenges with keeping their crews provisioned. Honestly, I was having line trucks coming through my hub so I could give them food and water. I know that they had pace problems, so take that one down if you're doing continuity planning for them. Pace problems, not having backup communications, because again, I had line trucks coming to me asking if I had extra Valfane radios, which of course I appreciated them asking, but I had to smile and say I absolutely do not have extras, because they had no way of talking. But I would let them obviously get on my Starlink. I had an extra Starlink airdropped by Hilo a couple weeks in, so our hub had open Starlink for everyone 24/7. So I'd at least allow them to use communications that way. But I do know that their lack of redundant communications was an issue for them. But they've been working hard. They're still going. I was driving through Bat Cave area just a few weeks ago, and there were Duke linemen out there still putting up fresh line poles here 6-7 months later, unfortunately.
And I got another question from Eric saying, what type of shortfalls did you experience by not joining forces with the federal contract? As an example, do the local, state, private orgs not want to engage?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say the biggest shortfall was lack of long-term provisioning and funds. So early on, we had the benefit of getting some of the provisions, like I said, dropped by Chinook, regardless of who we are, because that was the stage of the federal operation. But later on, you don't just get those federal log pushes anymore as a private entity, and also funding, because very quickly, the first couple of weeks, obviously, you're going out of pocket. After that, there's a lot of emotion nationwide, people willing to make donations, but guess what? People's give crap drops off very quickly. And so do donations. So it was a very big fiscal constraint and continues to be to this day. So I'd say those are the biggest shortfalls you encounter. Coordination and communication with federal or state entities was never really a problem, at least for my organization, because I have no issue talking to them and coordinating with them. I think it'd be rather foolish and egotistical to do otherwise. But I certainly would take every conversation with them with a grain of salt. And make sure that anything I was doing was still to the benefit of my hub operation in the community that I was helping.
And I have another question from William. For endurance, were there multiple teams created to continue to provide aid and support over extended period of time for physical and mental resilience?
Absolutely, yes. And that became a huge issue for us about 10 days in, because before you knew it, we had, the same leaders, the same hard chargers going constantly, right? We'd be pulling nighttime security shifts. We'd still be there at 6 a.m. to open the hub, and we'd be there till it closes at sunset, and then a couple more hours to sort supplies, right? You can only keep that going so long. So we did absolutely start building shift rosters. There were many times where I would have to do the Army leadership thing, where I'd have to go to someone and tell them that in no less words, I am ordering you to leave the site, go home and sleep. Because I did have a couple guys fall out. They went down from just malnutrition or illness because they ran themselves ragged. And very much had to keep that attitude, and yes, mental health as well. Because you start, especially the field teams, going out and seeing some of, we'll be candid and honest, the bodies in trees, dead children in mud. That stuff was out there, and I don't care who you are, that gets on you. So staying aware of that was critical, yes.
And a question for myself is, in hindsight, anything that you would add to your personal preparedness, and what are some of the lessons learned that you might do differently? I mean, it sounds like you were very selfless throughout this whole event, but what did that look like for your personal family relationships, and what does that support look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. From day one, I was working on the laundry list of things I wish I had done better. It may shock all of you to know that I did have a fair amount of supplies and things ready. I'm a preparedness mindset person. However, I still got some things wrong. One is always assume that your plan A won't work. As an example, I did have solar on my house with a battery system. Guess what didn't work? What didn't turn on? Right, the inverter fried itself, so my backup power went out. And while I did, of course, have my extra gas generator, which I brought back to life and got going, but I did not have the
You're cutting out on us a little bit. I think we might have lost him. I'll just wait for another second. Maybe his reception will improve. Can you still hear us? Curtis, I think we lost you.
He's on mute right now. Looks like.
Let's see here. Yeah, I could hear his cell reception cutting out a little bit. So
Yeah.
maybe he's just in a blackout area. But I see Chris had another question down there, but I think we may have lost him. So we'll give it another minute, and then if he doesn't rejoin, then I guess we'll wrap up the call.
Yeah, I like to say, looking at some of the things and talking about that flexibility and agility, he talked about reading the people, and anyone in the resilience space knows that you're a people person. You're dealing with people. Everything's people, process, and assets. So you have to have that emotional intelligence to read the people. He understands when the security posture needs to be forward and showing that we're not a soft target, to evolving to be in that community stage and all that. So that's a really good thing to focus on is, even if you're not in this level of response, maybe you're just doing a BC plan, read the people. It looks like we got him back.
Okay. Yeah, we got you back.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yep. Lima Charlie.
Great. Apologize for that. I'm going through the mountains. On flex it's absolutely crucial. It really is. And part of that as well is task-oriented leaders. I would add that became a big thing, is recognizing individual skills. It can be professional or it can be interpersonal. As an example, I had a person that was great at logistics, but please don't let Steve talk to anyone because he's gonna piss them off immediately. So guess what? I'm not gonna put him with all the other volunteers. So read the room, know what the needs are, what the capabilities are, and be flexible based on that. If that makes sense.
Yep. And I got a question from Chris. How did local businesses affect your operations or a lack thereof?
Absolutely. So local businesses became very pivotal for two reasons. One, if they had something that they could help with, they did help, which was outstanding. To bring some food out for the volunteers or something like that. That reminds me of another fun comment in a minute. But also two ways, understanding their specific needs. So if they needed shovels to dig out their business, or they needed water while they're working, we could get that to them. And try to kind of work in both directions. So helping local businesses and working together was key. And what I was getting at with the food as well is have an appreciation for the sustainment of your recovery operation. Again, any level of business continuity or disaster relief. As an example, what I had to deal with civilians very quickly in week one, they're going, we're volunteering, where's our hot chow for lunch? Meantime, there's Kirk standing there with a peeled open can of chili mac in a plastic spoon. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Go over there and get one of those. And that was kind of shocking to them. But appreciating what they don't see as realistic.
And did you see in after or during this event the community kind of come together to support each other?
Absolutely. I can definitely say that, differences were set aside in the ways just to help each other through what was a very big crisis. Now, when it comes to reading room, I would also add in, as you move through those phases, you move further away from the point of crisis, recognize where some of those things start coming out. So, after a few weeks, we started going back to, okay, well, now I'm dealing with some personality conflicts here, some people not getting along because they're no longer scared. And again, have the kind of change those dynamics, whether it's personal or organizational. That stuff started coming out after a few weeks again.
Yep. Any questions for you, Daniel?
No. You want me to hit that next slide there?
Yeah. So go to the next slide, push that on. And what I'll tell everyone, where we're at as an organization is twofold. One, we've got sustained relief for this Western North Carolina region. What I've done is within my business, because it is a for-profit business, I've gone ahead and carved out what I'm calling the special missions director. So basically what is a charitable relief arm of the business to kind of run and maintain what we continue doing for Helene, because this is our home. This is our sustained effort here at this point. And right, we're probably going to go ahead and partition that out. And we're going to use it as a model for not just here in Western North Carolina, but nationwide, for future disasters. How can we leverage our expertise and lessons learned to immediately render relief and recovery for at the point of suffering? So we're going to focus on that long term. Towards the end of the summer, this summer when we approach the 1-year anniversary, we're planning some educational opportunities and events for the public, for communities, organizations, businesses, again, to kind of discuss lessons learned. So I'd encourage everyone to kind of follow us and watch for those announcements. There's going to be some big stuff announced in the weeks ahead, probably, for that. And then, outside of that, we're getting the feedback under us in terms of a business, because it is still a business. We did not make money since before Helene, and that's not sustainable. I have bills to pay. My people have bills to pay, and we're trying to get our client structure going again. Hence why I'm on the road right now. So everyone pray for us, please. Definitely like to get this business model going again. And we're going to focus on helping people, communities, businesses, and especially critical infrastructure be all hazards prepared for whatever the world has to throw at us in the future. And I would tell everyone on this call, and especially any other veterans not on the call that are in your network, to
You cut out on us. We'll just wait another minute. Hopefully we get it back pretty quick this time. Oh, we can hear you now.
All right.
Curtis is still. All right. Yep.
So what?
Sorry, oh, go ahead.
Got me?
Yep.
Yeah, we got you.
No worries. So what I was saying is, follow us and reach out if there's ever anything I or my team can help answer questions on, advise, anything. We love being there for our brothers and sisters very much. And if you ever think you may want to work with us or be a part of our organization, even just on call and standby, reach out. Send me a resume, send information. I love building dossiers and pulling in more veterans. So I'd encourage y'all to reach out, please. Pass the word. Anybody can reach out or ping us.
Excellent. Hey, thanks so much for sharing this great story. I think that there are so many learning elements here, but I think that we can all relate as we've been in different, unique and tough situations. But this is really eye-opening because of how biblical, and the severity of all this was. I mean, it was just, it's just unconscionable just to think of the levels of what happened.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. And
thank you. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying, for my Pop Fox. No, you're fine. I'm stepping on you now. I was just saying, just absolutely, and I'll tell you, even from everything I've been through, my service and time, that this was eye-opening and shocking. I have learned a lot. So, yes, back to you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for taking time again to share with us on your your experiences here. This is things that I think anyone in the room probably didn't think they would have to experience, and now they've got a bit of insights of what they would do in that situation, and it just helps you understand what the impact is when you have such a catastrophic event, how those plans fall through, and what you have to do to make sure those things keep going. Whether they're a private organization or a public organization, these things are important lessons to know, and you've been through them. You taking time to share with us is extremely valuable.
Absolutely, I'm very happy to help.
Getting a lot of chat comments, just people saying thank you and
Yeah, thanks for the presentation from David, from Matthew. Awesome insight, great work. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for sharing your personal and professional journey throughout this event. Great job. Thank you, Curtis from William. Charlie, thank you for your service. Brian, thanks, Curtis. Stay safe. So yeah, a lot of good feedback on this. This is a really good webinar. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you facilitating it. Glad I was able to join in and help. And I wish everyone well. Again, never hesitate to let me know how I can help you.
Sounds good.
That's good. Thank you again.
Appreciate y'all. You take care.
Yep. Take care.